Iwori Meji competes for seniority on Earth. Upon arriving in the world, he discovered that his two younger brothers, Èjìogbè and Òyèkún Méjì, who had arrived here before him, had been respectively crowned kings of the day and the night. From the beginning, he was determined to establish his celestial seniority on Earth in relation to his two brothers. Even his sign, two inside and two outside, was designed to challenge the authorities of Èjìogbè and Òyèkún. They, for their part, were equally determined to impose their earthly authority over Ìwòrì. One afternoon, Ìwòrì was sitting at the front of his house when he saw a long procession approaching. He observed how everyone reverently bowed before the man on horseback who was at the front of the procession. When they reached where Ìwòrì was seated, he saw that it was Èjìogbè who was receiving all the reverences. Ìwòrì did not bow before Èjìogbè to greet him as everyone else did. He simply shook his orike, horsetail fly whisk, to greet Èjìogbè, as was customary among Awose, priests of Ifa. He saw no reason why he should kneel to greet his younger brother, even though there was nothing in tradition that exempted an elder brother from kneeling to greet a king. Then, Èjìogbè stopped the procession and ordered that if Ìwòrì considered himself too great to greet him like everyone else, then he should remain inside his house during the day if he could not submit to the authority of the king of the day. Iwori Meji then retreated into his house, upset. As night fell, he left the house and moved around. When he arrived at the crossroads near his house, he again saw another procession, at the head of which was Òyèkún Méjì, with dazzling lights that were as bright as the rays of the sun. Once again, instead of kneeling to greet Òyèkún Méjì, as everyone else was doing, he simply shook his orike as a sign. Then Òyèkún Méjì told him that if he could not submit to the authority of the king of the night, he should limit himself from leaving his house at night. So, he retreated into his house. Thus, he was forbidden from leaving his house during the day or at night. In that situation, he could not even go out to seek his daily sustenance. When Èṣù saw that Ìwòrì's condition was becoming unsustainable, he transformed himself into a chief to advise him to invite his two brothers to a meeting to resolve their conflicts. Èṣù's benevolence was in payment for the male goat that Èjìkòkò Ìwòrì had offered him before leaving heaven. Ìwòrì accepted the chief's advice and invited Èjìogbè and Òyèkún to meet him at the foot of the palm tree from which the divinities descended from heaven, and through which Runmila returned to heaven. Eventually, they gathered at that spot to discuss their issues. Both Èjìogbè and Òyèkún insisted on maintaining their earthly superiority over Ìwòrì. Finally, an agreement was reached that Ìwòrì would occupy the third position. He accepted the decision reluctantly. In fact, it was later revealed that he went back to consult the celestial Awose, who advised him to offer a ram to his Ifa, so that he could gain as much authority as his two brothers. He performed the sacrifice in heaven before returning to the world. The special significance of this part of Ìwòrì's life is that when it appears in Ugbodu, the person must be the third born in a family. He must have either reincarnated previously or died shortly after birth and been reborn through the same parents. We return to how Iwori Meji eventually surpassed his brothers. Many years later, the Awose who had performed divination for Ìwòrì in heaven decided to visit the nobles of the world with a proclamation. Whoever could reveal their names would be made rich. However, the proclamation also stated that anyone they visited who failed to know their names would be sent back to heaven in disgrace. They began visiting the reigning monarchs, and those who failed to reveal their names were forced to return to their ancestors in heaven. All of their earthly possessions were confiscated and stored in a mysterious bag that was neither full nor heavy. Around this time, all the reigning kings began dying one after another under mysterious circumstances. After dealing with the kings, the next place of visitation was the house of Iwori Meji, who was offering a ritual to his head, Ori, when they arrived. Before this, terrified by how death had been striking down the reigning monarchs, Ìwòrì had consulted his Ifa, who quickly advised him to offer a male goat to Èṣù so that he could survive the test that was soon to be imposed on him. He was instructed to add akara, bean cakes, eko, corn pudding, a gourd of palm wine, and 3 wooden sticks to the sacrifice for Èṣù. He was also told to make an offering to his head with a guinea fowl before performing the sacrifice to Èṣù. Ìwòrì did not delay and immediately carried out the sacrifice. After receiving the offerings, Esu built a small kiosk in the open space near the entrance of Ìwòri's house. On the day the celestial knights were supposed to visit Ìwòri, Esu placed freshly prepared palm wine, akara, and eko in multiple portions in the kiosk. After this, he waited there for any intruders. Shortly after, when the celestial knights passed by, Esu invited them to eat and drink inside the kiosk until they were satisfied. As they were eating, Esu asked them why they had come to the world when they already had so much to do in heaven. In response, they told Esu that they were heading to the house of Iwori Meji to test him with the greatest challenge of his life. If he could guess their names, they would make him a rich man, but if he failed, they would send him back to heaven. Esu tricked them by saying that Ìwòri was a very wicked man who would be delighted to see them die because he was arrogant. However, he persuaded them to reveal their names to him, so that after they killed Ìwòri, he could at least know the identities of those who finally eliminated the wicked man from the face of the earth. The eldest of the three picked up one of the 3 wooden sticks in the kiosk and struck his own legs with it, saying, "Unokare, akaka, raka, moni, diika." That was his name. The second one took another wooden stick, struck his own legs, and revealed his name as Wara, Wini, Oju, Egun. The last one grabbed the 3rd wooden stick, struck himself with it, and said his name was Iba, Afo, Demimu, Akpoko. Esu assured them that Ìwòri, the so-called wicked man, would have to go to heaven to learn their names. As soon as they left the kiosk, Esu transformed into another person and rushed through the back door of Ìwòri's house to alert him that the celestial knights coming to kill him were approaching. Then, Esu gave him their names in order of importance. After this, Esu and Ìwòri sat down together, waiting for the arrival of the celestial knights. Shortly after, they arrived. As soon as they appeared at his house, Ìwòri embraced them and called them by their names in a familiar tone, shaking their hands warmly. This is how he did it. Akakara kama monitika, ojure ri. Warawini oju egun, dojo meta. Iba afo demimu akpako, jure rie kerubo. Then, he motioned for them to sit down while he went inside his room to bring them kola nuts, as a gesture of appreciation for coming to help him serve his head. As soon as Ìwòri entered his room, Esu asked the visitors if they were awose, and they affirmed that they were. Meanwhile, the celestial knights hung their mysterious treasure bag on a nail on the wall of the living room. When Esu saw that they had hung the bag, he told them that 3 days ago, a diviner had prophesied to Ìwòri that 3 awose from an unknown land would visit him while he was performing a ritual for his head. The diviner had advised Ìwòri to use the 3 awose to serve his Ifa, so that he could prosper. Upon hearing this, the 3 men fled in terror, abandoning their treasure bag. When Ìwòri came out of the room with the kola nuts, Esu told him that the visitors had fled. Nevertheless, Ìwòri asked Esu to go after them. Esu shouted after them, telling them to come back and collect their bag. They responded that, as compensation for knowing their names, they would leave the bag to Ìwòri for his benefit. Then, Esu revealed to Ìwòri that the bag they had abandoned was a bag of wealth meant to make him rich. At first, the bag seemed to be dripping fresh blood, but when they opened it, they found it contained all types of wealth: money, bronze, and human servants in multiples of several hundreds. Ìwòri Meji then thanked Esu with another strong male goat. After this, he invited all the awose, including his 2 brothers, to a great feast, at the end of which he sang praises for the celestial awose, and there was joy and celebration. Thus, although Ìwòri Meji lost the battle for seniority to his 2 elder brothers on earth, he became far more prosperous than they were. If Ìwòri Meji appears in Ugbodu, the initiated person will surely be very prosperous in life, as long as they do not abandon their Ifa and maintain a close relationship with Esu through frequent sacrifices.